Is it possible to restore America's biblical foundation? We'll see as I interviewed David Jolly of Restoring Biblical Foundations. David, welcome to the show, and give us a little of your background. You've told me in kind of a pre-interview that you're from Arizona. You've kind of had a varied background. I don't want to go into all the stuff you've done because we only have 10 minutes. But how, give us some indication of your background and how you've got to, right now you're in Kentucky.
Well, I was brought out from Arizona to Kentucky by Answers in Genesis. I worked with them for 11 years.
Now, what did you do with AIG?
I was Ken Ham's personal assistant for 8.5 years, and for 2.5 years I was a research coordinator for the Creation Museum project.
Okay.
And I did a lot of varying things from correspondence to research, helped Ken with a lot of his writing projects and stuff, and they had to go through some financial downsizing, and was a victim of that. And
now, are you still up in the northern Kentucky area?
I'm still up in the northern Kentucky area.
Florence, Kentucky, and Cincinnati, kind of on the border there.
Right. And last August, I was brought on board with Restoring Biblical Foundations, and I'm the treasurer, speaker, researcher, book warehouse, writer.
Yeah, well,
becoming the web manager.
Yeah, I always tell people here, we hire people here, I always tell them, I said, you have to be able to do at least 5 things. We don't hire people just to do one thing. In fact, one of our board members, who was not at the time a board member, he's a pilot for Delta, had seen the address that we were very close, and he drove by here on his way to his home, and he wanted to come in and meet Gary DeMar, and Ralph Barker, who worked here at the time, Ralph still does some work for us. He said, well, he's right there, and I was unloading a truck. So you got to, this is a ministry like this, you got to do what you got to do, and it keeps your hand in everything. So give us some idea of what Restoring Biblical Foundations is all about. And by the way, that's the web address, restoringbiblicalfoundations.org.
We have several actual missions and goals. First and foremost is to promote the gospel of Jesus Christ. And you look at a lot of the founding charters in America, starting with the Mayflower Compact. One of the main items put in those charters was the purpose these people came to America to colonize, to set up their communities, was to promote the gospel of Jesus Christ. So first and foremost, that's our main goal. Secondly is we want to try to do what we can to restore America back to its biblical foundations, but we understand that restoration has to start with the church. We have to get the people in the church up off their keisters and have them become more active in taking a role. The Christian church has gotten silent over the last 60 years, and that's
there is this idea of the world's out here and we're here. We're doing our thing on Sunday. The world may be going to hell in a handbasket, but that's really not our concern because God has given us a spiritual ministry, and we don't want to be involved in these secular type issues. And I've been working on Zechariah chapter 14, and at the end of Zechariah 14, it talks about how holy to the Lord is going to be put on the horse's bridle, the bells, the pots, and so forth. And the essence of that is everything becomes holy now. There isn't this little place in the temple anymore that's set apart for things that are holy. Now the whole world becomes holy. Everything has what the high priest had on his head. Everything is now stamped with that. And a lot of Christians just don't understand that.
Well, a lot of Christians really don't live their faith, and I've contended for years that if Christians live their faith like a lot of Muslims do, we'd still have a Christian nation. 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. And I look back on biblical history, and time again, when the nation, and by the nation, the people of Israel, especially the leaders, turned away from God, God brought his judgment down.
Yeah, the shepherd. God talks about these worthless shepherds. And of course, Paul does the same thing. You get to Acts chapter 20, the wolves are going to come in, and he gives the instructions to the elders. This is your responsibility to keep the wolves out. And it was the responsibility in the Old Testament for the shepherds to keep the wolves out. These pastors today, the way they keep the wolves out is simply by not recognizing that there are any wolves out there. That's their solution to the problem.
And what I try and show, not only pastors but people in the church, that we would probably still be singing "God Save the Queen" if it had not been for the church back in the middle and late 1700s. It was the church, the Great Awakening with Whitefield and Jonathan Edwards, that really prompted the people to realize what was happening with the British and prompted the American Revolution. It was the church that was responsible for teaching and spreading it. Now we see a church that says, "Oh, I don't want to get involved. That's not our part," and that's why we're losing our country.
They used to have election day sermons. I mean, pastors would get up, and on election day, they would probably a few days before election day, but they would get up because there was a travel issue. That's one of the reasons why elections are held on Tuesdays, is because Sunday was not permitted as a travel day for most Christians, and so they would give them this extra day, and so that's why elections were on Tuesday. But pastors would get up and preach these election day sermons, and then you had this idea that it was called the Black Regiment.
Yeah.
And the Black Regiment wasn't, African blacks. It was pastors because they wore a black robe, and they got up to, address the issues related to politics. How does the Bible apply to this particular area of life? Pastors today, you talk about the Bible and politics, and I'll lose my 501c3 status, and that's the essence of their political involvement. That is, I'm not going to get involved.
That's true. You mentioned the Black Regiment, and I think of Muhlenberg, who addressed his church the one day in his black robe. And at the end of his sermon, he said there's a time to pray, and there's a time to worship, and there's a time to fight. And he walked to the back of the church, took off his black robe, and he had on the colonel's uniform of the Virginia militia, and said, "Who's going to come with me?" And nearly 300 men in the congregation followed him. Yeah. He became General Muhlenberg, very instrumental in Washington's regiment in the Revolutionary War. The church took an active part. Yeah. And our goal is to try and get the church back taking an active part.
And we're not, and friends, we're not asking people to join the militia. All you got to do is vote in an election. And you need to vote in an election based upon the principles of Scripture, and quit voting in terms of self-interest. You vote in terms of biblical interest. And if it hurts you personally, then so be it. And one of the reasons we're in the mess we're in today is because we vote for self-interest. I want to see how this particular legislation is going to affect me personally. Am I going to get I'm going to get health care? It's going to boost my Social Security. My public schools are going to be better, which means I'm going to take money from my neighbors. That's voting self-interest. It's not voting in terms of biblical interest.
Well, couple of the people I like to quote is John Jay, first Supreme Court Justice of the United States. He said that we have an obligation to vote for Christian leaders. At the first centennial celebration in 1876, then Congressman James Garfield, later became president, made an address. And in that address, he said that, people are responsible for the leadership of the country. If they elect leaders that are immoral, untrustworthy, are self-interest, that's a government you're going to get. Yeah. And he went on to say that if we have not, if in the next century, if America is not the great nation that it is today, that it's because the people aren't putting the people in office that needs to be there.
Yeah, part of the problem, we're running out of time here. I just want to conclude here. Again, it's restoringbiblicalfoundations.org, restoringbiblicalfoundations.org. And David, thanks for coming. Although one caveat here, just because a person is a Christian, I don't know if I necessarily want him running for political office, because you got a lot of these Christians out there who believe the government ought to be doing more to help the poor and so forth. And in fact, you're really pushing these people more and more into poverty. So David, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
American Vision is proud to present this year's Worldview Super Conference, July 21st through 24th at North Metro Church, Marietta, Georgia. For more information, visit conference.americanvision.org. That's conference.americanvision.org.